This is going to be the long-winded version of recording. Last week I did it completely quiet, and today I've been having a lot of fun in the front here and listening to my radio. That is, let's see, I'm pretty certain that's from the 70s. If not, it's the early 80s, because my father owned it first and I bought it from him, oh boy, in 81 or 82, something like that. Still works. I haven't tried the tape deck in a while, nor have I tried, boy, it has shortwave bands and marine band. I have no idea if it gets those or how that still works. But it still operates, so, and it still sounds wonderful, so I keep using it. Alright. Let's see. I should be starting up by the flower, shouldn't I? Okay, I'm going to climb the wall here. Okay, there's your normal starting point. This red hanging plant really misses it when it's low on water. I have to water it twice a day, and I have to water it pretty heavily, or it gets quite droopy. Do you hear the birds in the backyard? I've wondered about making a video of just the quiet, serene wind blowing through the trees, birds playing their songs, singing their songs. Maybe 15 minutes, just quiet and nature sounds. It would be relaxing. For most people, they're not looking for something to relax to necessarily, but it would be relaxing. Okay, I said this would be a little long-winded, so I'll give you some stories. I added a little bit more twine around the vegetable garden, trying to keep creatures from browsing on it, basically. If you look at the top of the tomato plants, we had a raider come through and truncate the top of just about every tomato plant that had any height to it. This was the first one, and I blame this one on the muskrat that wanders by from next door. The other ones was at Wednesday night, so Thursday morning I came out here and all these other ones had been chopped, basically at a foot high. Anything that had gotten up high enough got eaten. So we have not, to my knowledge, I did not think that the deer crossed from the neighborhood across from us and came into our yard. If you look back over this way, the White House down there, behind that is woods. They've cleared out the underbrush, so it's really just the trees, but there's a bit of a ravine with a creek that goes through that, and that's behind all those houses down that street. And I know deer wander through those woods, and it makes sense that they wander around their yard, but I didn't think they came up across the street into ours. But with the tops missing off the tomato plants, I'm ready to blame it on deer. So the idea with the twine is that the deer won't like sticking their head through around something that feels like it might catch them. And I don't know if that's going to be enough, but I had to do something, so I used up the spool of twine I have and created a bit of a net around it. And added a few more posts, some stray sticks from the backyard here. Just as every little deterrent I can think of. Trying to avoid the expense of adding metal fence around this. I may end up doing it. It's one of those things where, how much are your efforts in your garden worth to you? Because you end up spending more and more money for, what you get in vegetables clearly does not justify it. Not on a small scale. If you build it out more and build more protection, then I'm sure, with a good yield, and if you already had the fences in place, then it's much easier to justify. The expense makes more sense. This plant on the end here continues to be the all-star. It's basically this top part that got chopped off the other plants, which this is, I'm quite sure, what's going to yield blossoms, which pollinators will come by, and then tomatoes will begin. But it has to get up to the point where it creates these leaves, and this one's getting up there and doing it. So we're going to get something off of that plant. Even on the deck here, they did not bother these plants, but I don't know if you can see the blue string I added. Again, it's not a physical barrier that's stronger than they are, but it is something that they're probably not going to want to mess with, not on the off chance that they get a bite of something, because there really isn't that much vegetation there for them. Still, they will raid it. So let's go to the back corner. Now I haven't compared to old pictures, but I think the top of this tree has new growth. And that would tell me that it's beginning to feel happy here. Now a lot of the inner growth, the second layer of leaves, you can see they all shriveled up and have fallen out. But the upper is starting to create a new layer. It does not get nearly as much sun here as it got when it was on the corner of the house, but it seems to be coming along and finding its way here. Now I've been trying to keep this watered, and we'll see. I'm not taking it as a given that everything's going to be fine, but I suspect that it will be. You can even see with this one, I may have mentioned last week, and I put the sticks and ran some string around it because these little branches that came up in the back got chewed up and torn off by somebody. And I don't know if that's young growth that a deer would mess with, or if it's just like the neighbor's dog running through here or something. I'm not sure. But there's a few of them left, and I think they'll grow up and extend out to like a wood bark surface like these others have at some point. We'll see what happens. I just noticed there's a section here where the bark is kind of stripped back. I wonder if this particular branch here is starting to fail. I don't know. Okay. Lots of things to talk about, so I keep talking. It's been a beautiful day today. We have some very warm weather coming Sunday, Monday, and this is Friday right now. So today and tomorrow should still be fine. There's a little piece of ivy that came from the side of the house. And if I come around here, I'll go to the other little piece of ivy. And when I water back here, I've been watering these things too. These bushes are getting pretty thin, staying pretty thin. I cleared out a lot of the dead branches, and I ran a single piece of conduit, knocked it into the ground, put a hook on top, and basically used that for support. What I'm wondering is over time whether these bushes will have new growth like it has off the roots there, more towards the center where the trunk is, and balance out. They were definitely in a very different configuration when they were on the ground on the near side of the house. But we'll just see what comes along. The other one here does have new growth on the end. I have been every evening giving the whole plant a good soaking, plus the roots, of course. So it seems to be liking that. Same thing, where it's really thinned out from what it was when I first moved it, but the new growth tells me it's likely to survive here. And I did the same thing with the conduit. And so now underneath is cleaned up. I don't have boards and extra posts and string and all that back here anymore. All right, in the corner, the hosta, I always get a good picture of the hosta. It continues to get huge. Let me angle this a little bit differently. There we go. Although it does not get a lot of sun, it has been quite happy, and it's really rounding out. For the little piece that I brought back here, that I split off the one on the side by the garage, it's really grown into its own. It really looks like it started off this way. Down inside here, now it's becoming more clear that this is in fact the little peony plant. That's just sort of a little project. It started off as a root that I cut out of the rock garden on the side by the driveway. That was getting overshadowed by the ground cover over there, basically by this stuff, I think. So it had shrunk down and only grew a few inches each year. So I tried transplanting on the side of the house. That worked a little bit. Last year, it was starting to grow up. It was maybe 8 inches tall, and we had a hailstorm that broke its trunk, and that was it for last year. This year, I mentioned in an earlier video, I think it was one of the chipmunks that tried to take a bite out of the trunk, and that was the end of that. But I've kept it watered, and I still pay attention to it, put a little cage around it, and something is growing there. And who knows, maybe that plant will turn into something again, maybe it won't. I could just give up on it. It's a tiny little thing. It's not like I can't get another peony, but you know, it's a little project, and it's always interesting to see what can happen. That's my outlook with the tomato plants, even though the deer got to them, and that's definitely going to affect how they develop this year. You know, it's an experiment. You know, we haven't had a garden here. I think when we first moved in, my mother tried a garden for maybe a season or two, and that was it. You know, so for probably 50 years, we've had no sort of garden in the back or anywhere around the house. I think she said she grew a couple of tomato plants on the side of the house at some point. So what happens, happens, and I'll learn about the creatures and then decide whether to continue doing it in the future. A lot of debris from digging around in the front. We had a fair amount of wind, so I went around and picked up the sticks. I got to take those out probably Sunday night, because the town truck will come by again Monday morning and clean up our debris for us. Got around to cleaning underneath the overhang here, and now I've got everything stacked back in. A lot of loose stones. The lawn roller actually belongs to the next door neighbor. It's been over here since I was working on the yard last year. Let me borrow it, and I don't think he has a good place to put it, so it just stays here, and that keeps it out of the weather. In the winter, I make sure it's drained so it doesn't freeze and crack the cylinder. Several stones that I'll probably end up using in the front as I've been working. Well, I'll show you here. The tiny tomato plants, some are starting to grow a little bit. I keep them watered, and what happens, happens. Those were the last few I had inside. This one seems to be coming along nicely. Hopefully, whether it's deer or whatever, they don't find this area too soon. Okay. This hosta plant, we had some heavy wind with rain on Wednesday, and apparently that broke a couple of the leaves. We'll see what happens with it. I don't know if I should cut that one off. I probably should, and see what else happens. I've been working on the front here today. Dug out all the mulch and dirt and trimmed a lot of the ground cover that had spread into the fabric. You can see areas where it's pushing the fabric up. Got in there where the hose cleaned out some of it so I can get at things better. I will use some of those flat stones. You can see some areas where it grew right up through the fabric. So I pull those things out, and I'll be putting some flat stones around to kind of keep things contained the way I want them contained. Did a lot of trimming on these evergreens. Got some separation between them once again, and they're still dropping the early season needles. So I gave them a good shake this morning before I cleared things out to get all those yellow needles out of there. And I think I've gone full circle now. Oh, I should swing back around to this. Okay, so we've got the mulch that I pulled out from that area, and you can see these twin trees here. Burning bush. There we go. You can see the bees like this ground cover. There must be pollen in it. There's a couple of bees working it over right now. So when they're flowering, I don't do much weeding in there because the bees are here quite often. Okay, and then this evergreen over here, I got around to cleaning out all the mulch around these two and sifted out the powder and supplemented with some new mulch, and it ended up looking pretty nice. Also got to dig the trench around the edge. That gives more of a finished look, and I did that as well. Now we added in a lily from the next door neighbor. He had pulled out a few, and he showed me on the side of the house where he had them. He says, if you want one, and that's what I did. So I planted that. It seems to be happy here. It must be quite drought resistant because I put it in, the roots were dry and all this. He had dug it out, but it behaved quite well, and I've been giving it some water. And at some point, I think it shoots up flowers. I'm not sure if that's a spring thing or if that'll happen sometime still this summer. I don't know. Okay, I think I'm near the end. Actually, I know I'm near the end. Okay, the daisies kind of got pushed down by the rain. It happened on Wednesday. We must have had a fairly heavy storm come through. We were away for a few hours around midday and came back, and some things had changed. It's interesting. I mean, the daisies were all straight up. Now they are mostly laying down, and then just the flower turns to face the sun. It's nice getting close. All that white looks pretty. And that'll be it for this week.